Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I'm going to be walking you through how to install TrueNAS Scale on an existing NAS system like a Ugreen NAS like I'm using, or going ahead and building that DIY NAS and guiding you through how to install TrueNAS on it. Now I'm going to be utilising this Ugreen NAS. It's got 4 hard drives inside, 2 M.2 NVMe's and a separate SSD inside 128 gig where the TrueNAS operating system is going to live. I'm going to be covering installing TrueNAS for the first time. We're going to be going through setting up the storage with 1 disk of failure protection, setting up 2-factor authentication, setting up a shared folder and access over SMB, otherwise known as Samba, setting up your storage snapshots, setting up backups to USBs, backups to NAS and backup to the cloud, and finally installing Plex Media Server. Now there's a whole lot of more complicated installation factors and variables, but we are going to be keeping it simple today. This is going to be nice and straightforward for setting up TrueNAS in 2026 for those that are looking to step into the DIY arena. So regardless of whether you're using a pre-built NAS system or you've already built the system yourself, first thing you need to do is head over to the official TrueNAS website and download TrueNAS Community Edition, also known as TrueNAS Scale. We're not going to be looking at the Enterprise Grade Edition. Clicking that download, or putting in your email address for the newsletter type stuff and getting the ISO download link is up to you. But once you've got that ISO downloaded, the next thing you need to do is head over to Rufus and download either the EXE or the portable version of Rufus. This will allow you to turn that installing ISO into a USB. And obviously you're going to need a USB stick as well. Finally, a tool that you might want to download for later is known as Advanced IP Scanner for finding the NAS on a local area network. It's not essential, but it's a nice, useful extra tool. Next up, grab your USB stick and stick it inside your computer. Again, I would recommend at least an 8GB stick. You generally want one that's running on FAT32. From that, open up the Rufus application from earlier that you downloaded, and from that, select your USB drive, which should appear there at the top. Next, for boot selection, choose disk or ISO image, and then from that, click select and find the TrueNAS ISO you downloaded earlier. From here, most of the options can be left as is, leaving the partition scheme to GPT, the target set to UEFI, and leave the file system as FAT32. Double check that the correct USB drive that you inserted was selected, because it will get wiped. From that, click start, and then depending on the speed of the SSD in your system, the USB in your system, the installation should take no more than a minute or 2. After that's done, you'll be prompted to choose the ISO mode and then click confirm. When that's done, you can safely eject the USB. Next up, move over to your pre-built or DIY NAS solution, and from that you're either going to need to connect a monitor, keyboard and mouse, or you can go ahead and use a remote KVM device like I'm using here from GLI Net to be able to access the HDMI output of the system. From that, insert the TrueNAS USB installer you created earlier and then power on the NAS. It is useful to have it connected to the network at this point, but you can do it after this step if you prefer. Through there, go into the BIOS of the system, which is generally found by pressing F2, F12, F7, delete or escape, and once you're in there, double check that UEFI boot is enabled and that USB boot is also enabled, and ideally that the USB drive is the first in the boot priority order. Then select save and then reboot the system. From that, it will then read the TrueNAS installer via the USB drive that you inserted earlier on. From there, you can navigate via the blue screen options the installation of TrueNAS onto the SSD of your choice. I'm going for that 128GB SSD. Select install or upgrade. I recommend install. From there, choose the 128GB SSD in my case, or whatever you're using, as the install target. From there, confirm that you're okay with the disk will be wiped, and then from that, set your root password. This is going to be the most important password you choose to use, so get it right and don't forget. From that, select UEFI boot mode, and then from there, you should be good to go. Do not install TrueNAS on any of the hard drives that you plan to install data on your system. So if you've got a bunch of slow hard drives you're going to choose to use for storage, do not put TrueNAS on these. It has to be on a separate area of storage, ideally an SSD. When the installation completes, remove the USB drive and reboot the system. After that, via the HDMI output, you should be displayed with an IP address. Again, if you are not going to continue using the HDMI output, then this is where Advanced IP Scanner would come into play, but we'll get onto that in just a moment. hop over to the same PC or another PC that you may have been using up to this point, and then from there open up the web browser and enter the IP address you created earlier on the TrueNAS system that was displayed over HDMI. If this isn't available to you or the HDMI output is inaccessible, use the advanced IP scanner tool I mentioned earlier. This will scan the local area network, and as long as your machine of choice and the NAS are on the same network, you should see the IP and allow you to access your NAS via the web browser. From here, go ahead and use the root administration account and the password you created earlier on. After confirming everything works and that you can see the TrueNAS installation and initialization screen there and able to see all of your hardware, from this point onwards you can continue just via the IP on the network. Next, we're going to set up the storage. Select Storage and then Create Pool. From there, manually select all 4 of the hard drives. Depending on the version of TrueNAS you use, some of the options might be different or more or less graphical. Once you've selected all of the hard drives you're going to use, choose RAID Z1, which allows you one drive of failure without losing your data. Additionally, if you do have M.2 SSDs that you want to use for caching and therefore speeding up access and write processes, go ahead under this option, select Manual Disk Selection, from there click Add, and then from there drag and drop the one or more SSDs that you want to enable in this caching. Then click Save Selection and move on. Name the pool and then confirm with creation. Once the pool is created, create datasets for organization such as media, backups, documents. Each one of these data sets is going to be crucial to the way your data is laid out. Keep in mind, again, there are a lot more variables for tailoring these pools, and I'm not going to be covering them in this video. I recommend checking out Lawrence Systems for a far more detailed breakdown of a lot of the more specialized options. Now, before we move any further, let's further secure our system. Although we've created root access and a password, we can create additional users via the Users tab, or we can go ahead and ensure we've got two-factor authentication. So head over to Credentials and then Users. Edit your main user account that you've been using up to this point. Select the option to enable two-factor authentication. Then scan the QR code using the Authenticator app on your phone. Google have their own authenticator, Apple has their own authenticator. There are multiple options supported. Save the changes, log out, and then log back in to confirm everything works and your two-factor authentication is successful. Next up, we want to create shared folders. These are the areas of storage that you're going to be able to access remotely with the right permissions and credentials. Head back into the storage manager there and then select Datasets. Select your pool and then click Add Dataset. Create a dataset named Shared and then set dataset type to SMB or Samba. Repeat this process for other datasets if needed, like media or backups. Again, much like the datasets we created earlier, you can create customized rules and permissions for each of these. For each dataset, open Permissions, assign your read and write access to each individual user, and apply permissions recursively. These datasets are now ready to be shared on the local area network. Now we've created our shared folder area and our storage, we want to create snapshots. This allows us to turn back time via incremental recovery options. Go to Data Protection and then Snapshots. From there, click Add Snapshot Task. Choose the dataset you want to protect. Select a schedule, hourly for important data, daily for general files, or weekly for less mission critical data. Set a retention policy so that the oldest snapshots will automatically be overwritten by the newest over a given period of time, and then save the task. Now you've got snapshot protection on those datasets you chose to apply them to in the background. Next, we want to set up backup options. So for example, if you wanted to set up a USB backup for your TrueNAS system onto a USB connected drive, plug in a USB drive into the system. From there, go to Tasks, then to Async tasks or replication tasks. Select the source dataset and choose the USB drive as the destination for this task. Then go ahead and create a schedule, daily or weekly, for this task to take place. Alternatively, you can back up onto the cloud. Go ahead and create a cloud synchronization task by selecting Cloud Sync Task. Add your cloud provider credentials, Enable encryption to ensure that transmission, although a fraction slower, will remain encrypted from point to point, then set a schedule just like before. You've now got an off-site protection plan in place. Now, setting up Plex Media Server on TrueNAS is actually quite complicated, and I will be skipping over quite a lot of it. But the main things you have to keep on board is, for example, going into your datasets and ensuring you've got the right folder structure. You may already have created a folder structure for SMB and streaming multimedia, but when it comes to setting up Plex, where you want the data from Plex to live is actually pretty important, and permissions are more important than anything else. So, for example, I've created a folder structure here within a folder called App Data, another folder called Plex Data, and then from there, Plex Config, Plex Data Storage, where my TVs, movies and more are going to reside, as well as Plex Logs and Plex Transcoding. For each of these folders, by the way, make sure you put them within a directory that you're going to have each app to be living within. So, for example, I've created a parent folder called App Data for all of the applications, and from here I've created structures underneath. So, for example, when it comes to each of these folders here for the different kinds of Plex directory, for each one of these, so if I create a brand new one, I would highlight Plex Data, then select Add Dataset, and this one I'm just going to call Example in case I needed to create a new one, and then from there ensure that I select Apps as the preset. That will come in handy later on because this is going to be assigned to an application and therefore it's tailored accordingly. So once you've created that folder structure, make sure you've got one for logs, transcoding, general data and configuration. From there, go into applications, go into configuration, choose a pool that the data from these applications and services are going to reside within. Again, we're using Plex here, but this can apply to many others. Make sure you've selected the pool in question, and then from there, select either Discover Apps or Check Available Apps. From there, in the search menu for Plex, just search for the word Plex, and then down here, you'll find Plex and go ahead and install a stable version. Select it, and then from there, click Install. From here, you'll have the direct line of breakdown of installing Plex for the first time. So make sure you get your time zone correct, because trust me, that can cause problems later. So in my case, I'm in GMT main zone here. From there, I'll go ahead. You can add a claim token for Plex, or you can add that later on. It just allows you to bind it, and it's quite useful for things like transcoding and setting up remote access. From there, maintain official image. No need to select anything else if you're just going to use the same network identity for Plex as the main server, or set up a separate one with different ports and access if you want to ensure that it has its own dedicated pathway versus other apps and services. And then from there, don't change anything else. You can choose whether you want to use the host network or not. Personally, I've never selected this, but you can choose that if you want to bind it, if you choose, and we'll go on to that later on if you wish. I'll come back to that later. But from here, we need to make sure we select each of those folders created earlier on. So for Plex Data Storage, so that's where your movies and such are going to live, select that drop down and select Host Path, and then from there, find the structure that we created earlier on from within App Data in my case, and then you can see Plex Data Storage, and then repeat that for each of these steps. So configuration or config, select host path, and again find where you created that structure earlier on in order to assign each of these paths. So again, configuration. Next, we've got logs. Create the same thing, host path, break down the breadcrumbs, find it one by one, and as you can see, we've got our logs. And finally, we've got the transcoding for when files are going to be altered and where temporary files need to live during that process. Go in, App Data, Plex Data, and again, it will depend on your own structure there. And there you go, we've done all of that, and that's pretty much it. Aside from adding limitations to hardware utilization, I'm going to leave that blank, but if you're using GPUs for your server to increase transcoding, or you've got plenty of cores to play with, you can play with all of that. But apart from that, click Install, and it will install it and download the image. As I've already pulled the image, it's going to be quick for me, but for you, it might not be so fast. From there, you'll be able to go in and click the Web UI. This will open up in a brand new tab the first time setup of your Plex server. Normally when you click Web UI, it will open up into the initialization where you can name your server and start assigning directories. But because I've already done it on this server once before, it's directly gone into the Web UI, and as you can see, it's saying the libraries are empty. If you do find yourself on this screen, don't worry, just go into Manage Libraries. From there, start adding libraries one by one. So again, perhaps you want movies, go ahead and click Films, select Add Folders, browse for Media Folder, and then as you can see from those folders we created earlier on for transcoding and and for logs, go ahead into data, and then from there, that's where you should have assigned your different individual folders, and then you can scan and add those directories. And again, as mentioned earlier on, if you do want to claim the server, you are going to have to use a claim token that you can use with your Plex media server account if you sign in, or you can just assign the server via this option, but generally you are going to need that claiming token. Remember earlier on when I mentioned about the ports and connections? Well, if you didn't assign it to host ports, this is where you'll see those options there to find out the corrected port, but remember those are internal numbers. Lastly, if you have set up the system for different kinds of storage and you want to look on the fly where the access points are, select volume mount, and then from there you can see exactly which folder structure you can access Plex Media Server, and you can adapt these easily by suspending the application that you're running as a container, and then from there run edits and change some of the access points that you've provided to this Plex installation. Again, this has been an oversimplified example of how to set these things up, but a lot of the rules I've shown you here will apply to numerous different containerized applications. Again, as mentioned in the introduction, this video is not a deep dive. This is to give you the fundamentals early doors on setting up TrueNAS for the very first time. There are considerably more and much more complicated options for you to navigate when setting your TrueNAS server up right for the first time. So I strongly recommend the first time you do it, you be prepared to scrap your structure for the first time. Get to know the boundaries. Explore, find out what parts of the setup of TrueNAS are best suited to your needs, because almost certainly you are going to scrap your first configuration, whether it is because different elements of the setup no longer are relevant to your evolving setup, or simply that you didn't realize at the time that there were better and more configurable storage options better suited to your needs. Again, I strongly recommend Lawrence Systems breakdowns on the perfect TrueNAS setup, because he's got some fantastic deep dives. Equally, last year we saw Hardware Haven roll out a lovely 20 to 30 minute first time TrueNAS setup. And although it doesn't go into the detail that Lawrence Systems does, I will say it does go into a lot of the storage options in ways that are not expressed in this video. But this has been nailing down the fundamentals on setting up TrueNAS for the very first time on a turnkey or DIY NAS solution at the start of 2026. I'll be going through a few more different options later this year, but I wanted to get the fundamentals video done first. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.